Attention. If you are moved by the silent resilience of a mother and the ultimate cost of unchecked ambition, then you need to smash that subscribe button right now. Hit like and comment to share your thoughts on this true story that proves genuine love is built on presence, not prestige. The Ghost in the Boardroom. Julian Croft had always believed that life was a structure built on order, logic, and absolute control. He knew how to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts, predict markets, and bend entire industries to his will. He understood power and exactly how to maintain it. Yet, when Stella Donovan told him she was pregnant, something inside him shattered. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much, and he had no idea how to manage the vulnerability that came with it. His fear took the form of arrogance, and pride morphed into an impenetrable shield. In a moment of paralyzing panic, he had typed the words that would define the next 4 years of their lives. I wanted a woman, not a mother. He convinced himself it was the right decision, that she would be better off without him, that he had spared them both a life filled with stress, resentment, and limitation. He plunged back into his work, making his company grow even larger, more powerful, and more demanding. He filled his life with meetings, events, superficial relationships, and noise. If the thought of Stella crept into his mind at night, he dismissed it. If he wondered what became of the child, he buried it. If he felt a dull ache in his chest recalling her laugh or the way she used to touch his hand while talking, he trained himself to forget. Meanwhile, Stella felt the world drop out from under her feet. She had loved Julian with a sweetness that terrified her, and when he left, she had to learn to breathe all over again. The pregnancy was harder than she expected. There were complications, physical strain, and the overwhelming reality that she was utterly alone. When the doctors told her she was having triplets, she laughed through tears, unable to distinguish if the emotion was joy or sheer panic. She worked as long as her body allowed. She saved every dollar. She relied on distant acquaintances for small favors and forced herself to stand tall, even when exhaustion blurred her vision. When the girls were born, their tiny cries filled the hospital room like a storm breaking after days of heavy sky. They had dark, wavy hair and eyes of a brilliant blue so familiar that the air caught in her throat. They looked exactly like him. For a moment, she half expected him to appear in the doorway, to say he was sorry, to try to say anything. But the doorway remained empty, and she embraced her daughters with a heart that was both broken and fiercely alive. The first year was pure survival. She slept in small fragments between feedings. She learned to hold all three at once, to rock them with a rhythm that became instinct, to silence her own tears so as not to wake them. There were days she felt herself disappearing into motherhood, dissolving into milk, blankets, and lullabies. But there were also moments of breathtaking tenderness, the way each of them wrapped their tiny fingers around hers, the quiet weight of them sleeping on her chest, the sudden laughter that filled the small apartment like sunlight. She discovered a strength in herself she never knew existed, a strength that didn't roar, but simply endured. 4 years passed. Stella had built a life in a small coastal town in Oregon, far from skyscrapers and polished offices. She worked part-time at a small cafe, and the owner allowed her to bring the girls when childcare failed. The town knew her name. They smiled at her, helped without asking when she dealt with 3 pairs of mittens, shoes, and hair ribbons. She was still tired, but the exhaustion no longer felt like drowning. It felt like living. The girls grew into bright, curious children who laughed loudly and ran everywhere. They adored the ocean, the sand, the seagulls, and the world felt full of new beginnings. Julian never knew any of this. He continued his high-flying life, though something in him began to dim. The relationships he pursued felt empty. The achievements no longer satisfied him as before. He couldn't explain the sense that something was missing, a faint echo of something important he had thrown away. He never said Stella's name, but sometimes, walking home late at night, he thought of a sweetness he once had and lost, and the pain returned, sharper than before. He still did not know that his carefully constructed life was just one step away from shattering. He did not know that destiny was waiting for him on a park path, in the sound of children's laughter, in the familiar blue of 3 small pairs of eyes. He did not know that everything he had run from was about to find him again. 2. The reckoning on the shoreline. The day Julian saw them began like any other, ordinary in a way that gave no warning of how everything in his life was about to twist. He had traveled to the coastal town for a business acquisition, expecting to spend a single, efficient day reviewing documents, signing contracts, and returning to the city before nightfall. His assistant had booked him a quiet hotel near the shore, and when the meetings ended ahead of schedule, he found himself with an unusual stretch of free time. The sky was clear, the air soft with the delicate scent of salt and flowers drifting from the dunes. And for the first time in months, he walked without a purpose. He followed a winding path that led to a park overlooking the beach, thinking only of clearing his head before returning to his world of neat boardrooms and silent elevators. He wasn't thinking of Stella, not consciously, though she lived in the quiet places of his memory, like a song he couldn't quite forget. So when he heard laughter, high and bright, like something breaking in the air, he didn't expect the sound to paralyze his body. 3 little girls were running across the grass, chasing each other in uneven circles. Their curls bounced with every step, wild and soft, the color of dark chestnut kissed by sunlight. When one turned toward him, her eyes gleamed a shade of blue he knew far too well. He felt the moment as a physical blow. His breath hitched. His heart stuttered in his chest as recognition slammed into him. He watched them for several seconds, unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe. Then he saw her. Stella was sitting on a blanket nearby, her hair catching the sunlight, strands of gold shining like something heavenly. She was smiling, a quiet, soft smile that came from somewhere deep inside her. A smile that belonged to someone who had survived something painful and still found beauty. The sight of her hit him harder than he was prepared for. She looked different, not the fragile girl he remembered, but a woman who had been remade by life. She looked tired, yes, but strong, rooted and complete in a way he had never allowed her to be when she was with him. He couldn't tear his gaze away. One of the girls stumbled, and Stella stood up, moving toward her with calm, firm strides. She knelt, checked the girl's knee, kissed it softly, and the little girl's tears softened into small hiccups of laughter. It was such a simple moment, but for Julian, it was devastating. It was love in its purest form, love that he had rejected, love he had believed he didn't need, love that had kept living, growing, thriving without him. He felt the weight of his past words crash down on him like heavy, merciless, cold water. I wanted a woman, not a mother. He remembered the message exactly. The sting in her subsequent silence, the way she had stopped replying. He had believed he was saving himself. Now he understood he had simply cut off everything that might have made him human. He took a step forward before realizing he was moving. The girls noticed him first. They looked at him with curious, open expressions, the way children look at something new and unknown, but not frightening. Then Stella looked up. For 1 second, time stopped. Her eyes opened only slightly, enough for him to see the shock bloom behind them, the sudden storm of old pain, disbelief, memory, and something sharper. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't say his name. She simply straightened, pulling her daughters closer with a subtle, yet instinctive, protective movement, in a way that told him everything he needed to know about the years he had missed. Julian felt something contract in his chest. The words he had once prepared, the apologies he had imagined but never spoken, faded from his mind. All he could do was stand there, staring at the life he had thrown away and the family he never imagined would exist. Stella didn't look away, but her gaze was distant, firm, unwavering. She was not the girl he left. She was a mother now, and her strength radiated from her like a quiet fire. He finally uttered her name, and his voice sounded unfamiliar, rough, unsteady. She didn't respond. She just held the nearest girl's hand and waited. The silence between them felt like the ocean itself, vast, deep, and filled with everything left unsaid. The moment was not a reunion. It was a reckoning. And Julian understood, perhaps for the first time in his life, that love was never something he could control, discard, or run away from. It was right in front of him, 3 small reflections of his own eyes watching him with innocent curiosity. And Stella, who had learned to live without him. The world he had built for himself began to crack, and he knew without a doubt that nothing would ever be the same. Audience interaction. If you were Stella, what would have been your strongest emotion in that moment? Silent fury, sadness, or the cold satisfaction of surviving without him? Comment your first reaction below. 3. The test of time. Showing up every day. The shock of seeing Stella and the girls did not fade when Julian returned to his hotel. It settled deeper, growing heavier, like a weight he couldn't drop. He stayed awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, the girls' laughter echoing in his memory, and Stella's firm, cautious eyes holding him like a mirror he could no longer avoid. He had imagined how it would feel to see Stella again, but nothing prepared him for the reality of the 3 little girls, Penelope, Daphne, and Willow, who clearly carried his features, his expressions, even the same slight dimple near the corner of their mouths. They were undeniable. They were his. The next morning, Julian made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of leaving town, he found himself walking the same path back to the park. He approached carefully, understanding that Stella's silence was not anger, but a boundary. He sat down a respectful distance away, leaving space between them. He wanted to talk, to explain, to apologize. But the words that once felt rehearsed now seemed too small for the weight of what he had done. He simply watched them, letting the moment unfold on its own. After several minutes, the boldest of the girls, Penelope, stood up and walked toward him. "Are you lost?" she asked, with the clear, bright voice of a child who hasn't yet learned caution. The question hit him. He felt something tighten in his chest before he answered softly. "Yes, I think I was." Stella's eyes flickered. Barely. Julian swallowed and finally spoke to Stella, his voice quiet and firm. "I didn't know," he said. "I thought I could leave and move on. I thought leaving would protect everything I'd built. I was wrong." Charlie traced a line in the sand with her finger, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm, like someone who had learned their strength the hard way. "You didn't just leave," she said. "You erased us. You erased me." "I know," Julian said. "I know there's nothing I can say to undo that. I didn't need your money," she continued. "I needed someone who wouldn't run away when life wasn't perfect. I became a mother overnight, and I did it alone." She paused, her gaze returning to him, steadier now. "I'm not letting you back in just because you regret leaving me." He understood. Regret alone wasn't enough. He would have to prove his capacity to stay, to show up. "Let me try," he said quietly. "Not for me, for them, and for the person you became while I wasn't looking." Stella rose, gathered the girls, and began to leave the park. She paused beside him. "If you really mean it," she said, "you'll still be here tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that." Then she walked away. And for the first time in years, Julian did not leave. He watched her go, and he knew he would return. Because he finally understood what love required, showing up not once, but every single day. 4. The quiet work of redemption. Julian returned to the park the next day, and the next, and the next. The routine felt fragile at first, but with each passing day, it became something firm and grounded. He arrived early, sometimes before Stella, and sat on the same bench overlooking the shore. Stella remained cautious. Her caution was not cold, but patient, molded by years of pain rebuilt, piece by piece. She didn't test him, nor did she make the path easy. She simply allowed time to reveal if his efforts were real. The silence between them began to change, no longer painful, but thoughtful. He learned their names slowly, making sure to say them softly, like something precious that didn't yet belong to him. He learned which girl liked collecting seashells, Daphne, which one feared dogs, Penelope, and which one hated having her hair brushed, Willow. One morning, the boldest girl ran up to him, holding a small, misshapen sandcastle. "Look," she said, "I made this." Julian took the fragile sculpture with careful fingers. "It's perfect," he said softly. She smiled, and for a moment her smile looked exactly like his. As the days turned into weeks, Julian stayed in the town longer than he ever intended. He helped where he could, small things. At first, carrying groceries, fixing Stella's sticky front door latch, bringing coffee to the cafe where she worked when she had slept too little. He didn't announce his actions. He simply showed up, quiet and consistent. One afternoon, one of the girls fell while climbing a rock near the tide line. The fall was not serious, but the shock made her cry. Before Stella could reach her, Julian was already moving. He knelt, lifted the girl carefully, and held her close, whispering reassuring words. The little girl's sobs softened into hiccups, her face pressed against his shoulder. When Stella reached them, she paused, her hand hovering in the air. Julian looked up, and their eyes met. There was no triumph in his gaze, only tenderness and a quiet sorrow that spoke of all the moments he had missed. Stella let the moment continue. Later that evening, Stella invited him to walk home with them. It was the first time she had done so. The girls skipped ahead, while Stella and Julian walked behind, their steps falling into the same rhythm. "You're different now," Stella said finally, simply observing. Julian sighed slowly. "I lost something I didn't know how to keep. I thought love made you weak. I thought building a big enough life would protect me from needing anyone. I was wrong." He looked out at the ocean. "I can't undo what I did. I can only be better now." "I don't know where this goes," she said. "I don't know what you can be to them, or to me. Whatever you allow me to be, I'll earn it, slowly." When they reached the house, the girls ran inside. Stella turned back to him. For the first time in 4 years, she smiled. Not the girl she once was, but the woman she had become. It was small. It was enough. The shared burden and the breakthrough. The days that followed grew warmer, and the bond between Julian and the girls strengthened. Their trust came from his presence, his repetition, and the quiet assurance that he kept showing up day after day. Stella allowed the connection to form, even while she guarded her own heart with deliberate strength. One evening, the wind was warm, and the sky was painted with streaks of rose. They walked home from the cafe, the girls running ahead. Julian and Stella walked side by side, the small, respectful space between them finally feeling comfortable. "You changed your entire life," Stella said, her voice firm. "It didn't happen suddenly," Julian replied. "I just woke up one day and realized the things I had built no longer felt like my life. I had success, I had respect, but it all felt like it belonged to someone who was no longer me." He paused. There was no warmth, no meaning. There was no home. "Home isn't something you simply find," Stella said. "You build it, and you rebuild it, especially when it breaks." Just as they arrived, one of the girls came running back, tripping hard. She began to cry, the sharp, raw sound of pain. Stella stepped forward, but Julian got to the child first. He didn't panic. He knelt, took her carefully into his arms, and held her, murmuring soft, firm words. Stella watched, and something inside her broke. Not painfully, but like something long frozen beginning to melt. He wasn't playing the part of a father. He simply was one. When the girl calmed, Julian carried her toward the house. Stella opened the door, and this time, she didn't ask him to stop at the threshold. She stepped aside. He walked in. "Stay for dinner," she said. He froze, his voice thick. "If you want me to." Stella's eyes softened. "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't want to," she replied simply. That night, Julian felt present, felt needed, and felt at home. A few weeks later, the healing hit a sudden roadblock. Stella received a letter from the hospital. One of the girls showed signs of a congenital heart condition. The doctor's words were clinical, but they sent Stella back to the paralyzing memory of being alone in the hospital. That night, Julian walked into the kitchen to find Stella sitting alone, the unopened envelope beside her. He sat next to her, waiting. Stella slowly explained the doctor's words, her fears, and the memories she had never allowed herself to say out loud. "I should have been there," Julian whispered, and his voice cracked. "I can't fix the past, but I am here now. Whatever comes, visits, surgeries, nights when you are scared and tired, I will be here. You don't have to do any of it alone ever again." Stella closed her eyes. When her hand closed over his, she left it there. Trust was not something spoken into existence. It returned in pieces, in quiet nights, in shared fear, in hands clasped through something heavy. Audience interaction. If Adrian had shown this dedication from the start, do you think Stella would have been as strong? Does true love require an initial painful separation to be fully appreciated? Like and subscribe. If you believe love requires consistency, the final vow, a new foundation. One evening, Stella stood on the porch looking out at the ocean. Julian came out a moment later and stood beside her. "I was afraid to let you get close," she said. "I thought if I did, I would lose everything I rebuilt. But I see now," she said, her voice soft but sure, "that maybe what I rebuilt was never meant to remain closed off. It was meant to grow." This time, she sought his hand. It was the first choice she made toward him since the day he left. Not a return to the past, but the beginning of something new. The end of summer came. Their lives had settled into a rhythm that was real, not perfect. Julian no longer approached the house with hesitation. The girls called him Daddy, in small, accidental moments at first, moments that paralyzed him, as if the world itself had stopped to acknowledge him. One night, they sat on the back steps overlooking the ocean. Julian spoke first, explaining how his arrogance had been built not on strength, but on fear. He had panicked and chosen pride, spending 4 years trying to drown the consequences in work, money, and noise that couldn't silence his regret. Stella listened. She had waited years to hear not excuses, but the truth. When he finished, she did not forgive him immediately. She explained that she had learned to love herself in the space he left. She wouldn't lose that version of herself just because he had finally learned to stay. Julian nodded. He didn't argue. He simply said he understood, and that he wanted not to replace the life she built, but to be a part of it, if she allowed him. A few months later, the fear surrounding their daughter's health softened into something manageable, something faced together instead of alone. Their home filled with small laughter, shared meals, and mornings that didn't feel like battles. One evening, they returned to the same park where they had first seen each other. Julian stopped. She turned. No grand declarations. She simply looked at him in the way someone looks when they have finished running from their own heart. "I'm not promising a perfect life," she said, her voice firm. "I'm promising one you have to work for, one you show up for, every single day." Julian nodded, his eyes soft and firm. "I want that. I want all of it." She took his hand, not with hesitation, but with the quiet certainty of someone who chooses love because she wants it. The girls looked up from the playground, saw their parents' hands linked, and ran toward them laughing, eyes bright with the belief that the world was safe. And for the first time, it was. Not because the past had been erased, but because they had survived it and built something stronger in its place. Final thought. Julian Croft learned that the only legacy that mattered was constant tenderness, the chaos of family, and the courage to be present. Their story is a powerful reminder that regret is not enough. It is only the beginning. True redemption and genuine love are earned by showing up every single day. Thank you for reading. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us, in the comments, what does being present mean to you? The final test. The cost of the crown. The shadow of the empire rises. The quiet life they built in Seabrook Cove was sturdy, founded on daily consistency and slow-earned trust. Julian had settled into consulting work from his quiet study overlooking the cove, successfully managing his transition away from the corporate throne. He attended every school event, fixed every broken toy, and, most importantly, was there every single night for bedtime stories. However, an empire does not surrender its crown easily. One crisp October morning, while Julian was teaching Penelope and Daphne how to skip stones at the beach, and Willow was collecting shells, his phone rang, a restricted number he hadn't seen in months. It was Marcus, his former COO, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Julian, you need to hear this. The Chinese acquisition you set up, the whole structure is collapsing. Our key European partner pulled out, citing moral liability. They found out about the offshore move from 5 years ago. This is more than a deal. It's an SEC investigation waiting to happen. Our stock is hemorrhaging." The sound of the corporate world, cold and sharp, sliced through the salty air. Julian's hand instinctively tightened around the phone. He was needed, not for a meeting, but for a rescue. A crisis of this magnitude was exactly the kind of chaos that had once defined his identity and justified his absence. He looked up. Stella was watching him from a distance, the sunlight catching the gold highlights in her hair. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes held a quiet awareness. She saw the familiar tension return to his jaw, the instantaneous shift from daddy to CEO. Marcus pressed the point. "The board is demanding you return. They say only you can stabilize the company and protect the assets. Your old office is waiting, Julian. This is a $5 billion emergency. You have to come back." Julian's breath caught. This wasn't about ambition. It was about responsibility and the immense financial wreckage that would follow if he didn't intervene. Could he truly sit by and watch his life's work, and the thousands of jobs attached to it burned to the ground. He knew what this meant. To fix it, he would have to leave. For a week, a month? He saw the scene in his mind. The cold glass towers, the endless nights, the feeling of being indispensable. He felt the old, intoxicating pull of the power he had tried so hard to discard. He looked at his daughters, their hands sandy and their faces bright with innocent joy. He saw the trust in their blue eyes. He remembered Stella's quiet command, "You'll still be here tomorrow," and the day after. Julian finally spoke, his voice low, firm, and steady. "I'll handle it, Marcus, but not from the city. I'll handle it remotely. I am not coming back." Marcus scoffed. "You can't save an empire via Zoom, Julian. You're being sentimental." Julian ended the call. He walked back to Stella, his steps heavy with the sudden weight of the empire he refused to re-enter. He explained the crisis, not minimizing the gravity, but emphasizing his decision. Stella listened, her face unreadable. "It's a big choice, Julian," she finally said, her voice soft but strong. "That life defined you for decades. Are you sure you can fight that war from this distance?" His choice was clear, but the fight had just begun. Audience interaction. Do you think Julian made the right decision refusing to return to the city, or should he have gone back temporarily to save the company? Comment your opinion. And if you agree that Julian must prioritize his family, hit like and subscribe. X. The test of distance and the whispers of fear. Julian turned his study into a secure command center. His days became a grueling marathon of early morning calls with Hong Kong, late-night video conferences with London, and non-stop damage control. He was present in the house, but his mind was 3,000 miles away, navigating the political and financial collapse. The girls, initially understanding, started noticing. Penelope would tentatively put a drawing on his desk, but Julian, deep in a tense negotiation, could only nod without looking up. Daphne asked him to build a Lego castle, and he promised, later. Willow, the sensitive one, stopped asking for his attention altogether. The distance was not physical, it was emotional. Stella saw the old shadows returning. Julian wasn't arrogant anymore, but he was absent in the way that mattered most, present in body, but utterly consumed in spirit. The silence in the kitchen wasn't comfortable anymore. It was tense, punctuated by Julian's sharp, whispered commands into his headset. One rainy evening, Stella finally broke. Julian was reviewing a legal document, his focus absolute. "You're not here, Julian," she said, her voice flat, devoid of anger, which made it sound far more devastating. Julian looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "I'm right here, Stella. I haven't left the house. I'm saving thousands of jobs and ensuring the security of the money that will raise our daughters." "You're not saving us," she countered, her voice now trembling. "You're saving a phantom. This is exactly how it started 4 years ago. The chaos came first, and then you chose to run from it. I know you're not physically leaving, but your mind has boarded the plane. I can feel the distance." She wasn't accusing him. She was voicing her deepest fear. The fear that the man she had learned to trust was just a temporary construct, and the CEO was his true self. That night, Julian lay awake, the image of Willow's sad, quiet eyes fixed in his mind. He realized the terrifying truth. He was failing the test of presence. He had prioritized solving the problem, the company, over protecting the people, his family. He was allowing the chaos to poison the order he had fought so hard to create here. He knew he had to do more than just manage the crisis remotely. He had to cut the cord. 11. The irreversible choice. The legacy of presence. The next morning, Julian did not go to his study. He walked to the kitchen, found Stella struggling to braid Daphne's hair before school, and simply took the comb. He finished the braid expertly, a small skill he had learned just a month ago. "I need to fly to the city," he said quietly. Stella froze, the heartbreak instantly visible in her eyes. "You're going back?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm going to finish this, permanently." He explained his final strategy. He would fly to New York for 48 hours to meet the board and Marcus. He would stabilize the stock, but more importantly, he would execute a strategic divestiture of the Chinese holdings, insulate the U.S. operations, and formally announce his complete and final withdrawal from the corporation. He would sell his controlling stake, stepping away from the wealth and influence he had spent his life accumulating, accepting only a minimal consulting role managed by an independent trust. "I'm not protecting the money, Stella," he said, holding her gaze. "I'm protecting us. I'm taking the company away so it can never take me away from you again. This time, I'm not running from the chaos. I'm running to you." The next 2 days were agonizing. Stella watched him leave, the old memory of the empty doorway clawing at her. But this time, he called. Not every hour, but at the exact times he promised. Before his flight, during the flight delay, and just as the girls were doing their homework. 48 hours later, Julian walked back into the small, warm house. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. He carried it loosely over his shoulder. He walked straight to Stella, pulled her into a long embrace, and kissed her forehead. "It's done," he whispered. "I'm free. We're safe." He pulled out a signed official letter. It was his formal resignation and divestiture. The wealth was still substantial, but the power, the control, the endless demands, they were gone. Stella didn't look at the paper. She looked at his eyes. They were tired, but the CEO's light was gone, replaced by the quiet, soft exhaustion of a man who had fought for his home. Later that week, Julian gave Stella a small gift, a plain silver band. "This isn't a replacement for the engagement ring," he said. "This is a simple, private promise. It symbolizes consistency. My choice to choose the weight of your hand over the weight of the world." Stella took the ring, tears finally falling. "I love you, Julian Croft," she whispered, her voice thick. "I love the man you fought to become." The man who once demanded order now embraced the beautiful, noisy chaos of a life built on vulnerability, not control. His redemption was complete, not when he apologized, but when he permanently dismantled the empire that threatened his commitment. He had traded a billion-dollar legacy for the only title that ever truly mattered. Daddy to his 3 daughters, and partner to the woman who taught him the true meaning of presence. Final thought. The greatest test of commitment is not in the moments of peace, but in the moments when the old, powerful temptation returns. Julian proved that true love is the irreversible choice of people over prestige. If you were moved by Julian's sacrifice, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you sacrifice for true love? End of story.